So today we are joined by Sriraj Mallick. Sriraj is the CEO of Infopro Learning, a global leader in talent development and managed learning services with thousands of associates throughout the world, offering solutions that support the entire life cycle of learning, from learning strategy to talent sourcing to content development and delivery, including e-learning, on-site classroom training, and instructor-led training. Sriraj's leadership, and I took this directly from your LinkedIn profile, is driven by his core belief and purpose of unlocking potential. He leads by fostering a transparent and authentic culture, a growth mindset, and building an energizing and inspiring workplace. So, welcome, Sriraj.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you for having me.
Surely, what is great about this is the intent of this podcast is to really delve into the mindset of leaders from the C-suite all the way down to the front lines. So to have an opportunity to check in with you and get some benefit from your insights and your learning, I think it's just a fantastic opportunity for all of us. And let's start with AI, since I know AI is on your mind, it's on my mind, it's on all of our minds to some degree or another. And this podcast focuses on disruption. And so much of your business and the business of your own
Mhm.
clients is being disrupted by AI in such a wide variety of ways. So tell me this, as a senior leader, how do you yourself keep up to speed? Because you can't dive deep into the weeds, not much. And how are you guiding your organization to adopt an AI business strategy?
Thanks for giving me this opportunity to be in this podcast. And it's a great topic, very relevant in today's time. There are, I've personally, like you, have gone through several cycles of disruption in our careers. Some of these disruptions are like they go through the hype cycle and they become a fad, they don't catch up and they go down. The trajectories are shorter. It is different this time with AI. My understanding, and still, I think we are still at ground zero of what we have to see in AI.
Hmm.
And my understanding, the way I am processing this, and I'm processing this with my team members, is how when we look at our different faculties of a human being, like eyes and ability to speak and ears to listen in, each one of these faculties have had some extension through technology. So we have mobile phones, which essentially extends our hearing capability and speaking capability. I and you can talk now using, and we can see each other as an example. So
Hmm.
we are using these three faculties through this technology of internet and video conferencing and so on and so forth. So what is different is each one of these disruptions are extending our ability to see, hear, communicate. So it's about ears and speaking and so on and so forth. With I feel this is the first time there has been an extension to our mind, our cognitive ability. And if what we can do now, being in ground zero, um, tells us the trajectory of what this technology can do as it grows and matures, and rapidly growing and maturing. So we see a big impact in our business. And we see that any business which has workflows, especially with knowledge workers, where when you have this additional cognitive ability available now, which is getting sophisticated over a period of time, then it means a couple of things for workers. One is it aids them and helps them, and sometimes it doesn't need them.
Hmm.
And many times, often, as it happens in our business, it changes the way workflows currently are executed in businesses. And so the way we are processing AI in our business is that it is a new faculty that allows us more cognitive ability and additional help or support. And that is disruptive in every business. And since we are in the business of learning and talent development, it is our job to help our clients solve that. And for that, we have to immerse ourselves and innovate in this space and learn ourselves.
I know where I'm struggling with my team is AI can be such a powerful tool in the right hands with the right person who already has a fair amount of cognitive ability, a fair amount of experience. They can look at the results of a generative AI output and they can discern, first of all, what's accurate and what's not, but then secondly, what's insightful, or sometimes the best of them. They'll take the AI generated output and from there, they create insight. They drive something really interesting through their own addition, the AI plus human. But you take that same powerful tool, and if you put it in the hands of a child, hands of someone who doesn't have the baseline background, it'll produce something that to them looks fantastic, but they won't have the ability to discern what is fantastic, what is not fantastic, what's usable, what's not. But I think for all of us, the challenge is knowing which is which, or when does one thing happen and when does another. Um,
But since you are dealing with a lot of leaders in your role in leadership development and change, how are leaders responding to this disruption? Do you have any first-hand information from leaders,
I would
other
say
companies?
a smaller percentage of them are responding the way you are. You are
Okay.
immersing yourself. In
Hmm.
fact, I think I started by saying, how do you not go deep into the weeds? But I think sometimes you are because of the disruptive nature of this particular new technology. You have to go deep for a while in order to see your way out of deep, as opposed to just presiding over it. Because what I see most commonly is leaders are just presiding, just learning enough to be able to speak the language, to be able to
Right.
sound somewhat intelligent. But the real work is the harder work, understanding at a deep enough level where you can decide, what's my differentiation strategy? How do I accelerate my business strategy using AI? How do I get a line of sight to what my competitors are doing and find ways to disrupt my competitors or prevent my competitors from disrupting me? I think a fair number of leaders haven't yet stepped into that level of depth because it's uncertain. Because there is no tried and no one has written a business book that that's widely accepted. It's not, you go back 30 years ago, you had Jim Collins, and Good to
Yeah.
Great was a summary of widely accepted best practices to grow a business. And Good to Great and 20, 30, 50 other books. There is no widely accepted set of best practices for AI. So it's unknown territory. So
Hmm.
it's leaders like you who I think are, like I said, you're getting into the weeds, you're cutting through the weeds, and eventually what will arise is widely accepted best practices. But that may
Yeah.
be months or years from now.
Yeah, it's a heavy lift, Dan. I feel like after the hype is over, a lot of teams just give up because they don't get the preciseness or the consistency that they are used to working with other team members. And so that's the trick, I think. How do we cross that bridge and still continue to see value? The other thing is we have to also look at it from another lens, which is the lens of the self. So I look at it as I'm like, I have these kinds of jobs to do on a daily basis. And so while I'm doing my own job as the leader of this company, how am I using AI in creating more efficiencies for myself, in enriching my own thoughts and maybe taking better decisions or giving better direction? And so that's almost a different work stream in my mind.
Yeah,
And that is giving me some good data points as to what is possible and what is feasible, what is possible now and what is feasible in short term and long term. And that sort of creates a good trajectory.
I just used Chat GPT 10 minutes ago where I had a list of about 8 questions I wanted to ask you for this podcast. And I thought, okay, let me give Chat GPT those questions and instruct it to ask some other questions that might go a little deeper, that might be a little more insightful. And it dutifully generated about 20 questions, of which 18 not so great. But there were two. Within that, there were two that I would not have thought of myself. And as I scanned down them, I grabbed it and so I found it actually quite helpful. And in fact, let me transition to one of the questions that ChatGPT recommended that I ask you, because you uniquely lead an organization of technology innovators, content creators, training designers, all very talented, creative minds. all with very strong points of view. And of course, you want that. You want all of that creativity and innovation and strong points of view. But when those
Mhm.
people don't agree with each other, I know there can be conflicts, there can be challenges related to that. And then you add to that, you have a global team. So you've got cultural differences. And I wonder, how do you keep such a complex group of talented thinking adults, how do you keep them aligned to a mutual vision? Sorry to lay a really big question on you.
Yeah, I wish I could give you a really good answer about how great the my thinking and my process of change and my process of driving through this massive disruption is. But in reality, some of the answer is in some areas I have to just get stuff done. I'm relentless about something, and I'm not really too bothered about how nicely I am doing it,
Mm-hmm.
or what kind of change process am I following or not following. Of course, there is a good sense in your mind around boundaries and things like that. But some of this is really, it's time sensitive. So sometimes you just have to push through, and then it creates its own energy. Sometimes many people are non-believers to begin with, but slowly people start seeing some results, and then it starts to take some shape. So long as someone is learning and is persistent about something, that's one way. And that's one way in these cases, I feel like it works better in some of these cases. But then you have to think about organizational change and stickiness and adoption and internalization or integration. And then you add a layer of a large complex organization
Mm-hmm.
which is in different countries and cultures. And then you add a layer that every person is in a different stage or level or role in their life. And so then you establish very clear change management programs and plans where you start to create some interest, some excitement, give them some ownership, give people, create different task force. Like what I'm doing right now is in areas where I feel that I'm reasonably comfortable that this is going in a certain direction. So I'm creating a cross country task force and having people come together so they become the innovators and the discoverers, and we are just nudging them from the sides to give them some inputs but not all, and then they discover something different from where we started, right?
Right.
And then they embrace it and they make it their own, and then they then advocate for it within their own teams. So there's a whole change management behind it. But my short answer is there's sometimes in life and some things that you have to just got to do it.
And I do recognize that a lot of the conflict related to change, a lot of the interpersonal dynamics, it's natural noise that's going to occur. But I have noticed that every now and then, and you tend to flow. You keep delivering the message, deliver the message. But every now and then I notice impatience. It doesn't happen often, but every now and then I can just tell, all right, we crossed a point. What is it that causes you to decide, okay, this is no longer noise. This is a signal that something has to be addressed because we're not quite on track.
Some of this is instinct led, but that instinct is formation of years of working in the tech and the talent space
Mm-hmm.
and knowing where this will go. And often I'm wrong, and sometimes when I'm right, it really pays off for all the times I'm wrong or my team is wrong. So this time, just because if you look at the maturity of the technology and how it is disrupting workplaces, I can clearly see that by the time I'm catching up with my team and I'm like, we are all saying, let's do this, and we are building a prototype and a pilot, we are seeing some other teams actually going further than that faster.
Mm-hmm.
So we clearly see that there are teams, especially smaller teams and startups, they have such a huge advantage to move forward faster. And so we are always trying to catch up. And in those scenarios, it gives me a signal that we have to fight a good fight here.
Yeah.
And so we really have to move forward faster and we will learn. I truly believe that there is some time to take a lot, sometimes you have to take a lot of time to think properly and have all your inputs organized. And many times you don't have all the inputs and you have to act, because the best thing that action does is action creates information. And for companies who are really innovating, when we take action, it creates a lot more information that gives us more actions. And so that's how we iterate. And you and I have been working on this new program, and we keep on going back and forth about it. But every time we move forward a little bit, it creates new set of information, and then we have to go back to the drawing board and push again. So that's
Well,
how I deal with it.
and I've noticed there have been many times where people will ask for information, and essentially what they're asking for is enough information to make a no risk decision, enough information to decide what's the obvious thing to do, what's the obvious way to move forward. But in this particular project, we're never going to have that. It's going to be always be 80% or 60% of what the ideal information would be. But I love the way you say it. Action creates information. It might
Mhm.
mean, oh yeah, that's taking us in the right direction, or maybe not so much the right direction. Have you always been so comfortable acknowledging when you don't get it right, or when you don't know something, or you're not certain about something? Because that is somewhat unique with CEOs. When I talk to CEOs, they tend to present as hyper confident, go get them. I know my business. I know my market. I know my strategy. Go, and not so confident or not so comfortable saying, "Here's where I got it wrong," or "Here's what I learned from that misstep." You, on the other hand, from almost the very moment I think we've known each other 4 years now, almost the very moment you that we met, you were acknowledging, obviously you succeed more than you fail because you are where you are, so your judgment is right more often than it's wrong, but you seem very transparent with acknowledging when your judgment may not have been optimal. Has that evolved over time, or have you always been like that?
No, it's an evolution, and a large part of this is because I'm backed by an amazing team, and they keep me honest and they keep me grounded in many ways. What it does is, what I have understood is fundamentally, and it took me some time in my career to understand this, that I don't want to win an argument. I want to win. So if I want to win, I have to take all kinds of inputs to win. And that means I have to be very open to my failures. I have to be very open to taking inputs. Even in many cases, I know some of my team members are going in a certain direction, and they may not be like going in the right direction, or maybe not succeed, because I have seen that, I played that in
Mhm.
my mind. At some point, you have to let them fail in their own way at some point, but you have to create some guardrails, right? So I learned this after making a lot of mistakes, to be honest with you. It's like when you are in a startup mode, you do so many things with your own hands, and then you build a larger organization, you start to delegate, and then it took me like few years, couple of years, to really create a balance between how do I delegate and leave this alone, and how do I, like, this is important, I need to be on top of it. That whole cycle took me a lot of time to learn, actually, honestly. And I'm still not perfect at that. But by making sure that I'm honest about and transparent about our own lessons that we learn and our own failures, and we are transparent about sharing that with each other in our
Mhm.
company, that really helps me overcome some of those hiccups that I eventually get to.
So many of us from a distance have a vision of what it must be like to be the CEO of a large global business. We imagine at the end of the day, you shut your laptop down and then you go to your throne room, sit on your throne, and your feet are pampered, and that life is good. But what is the reality, or what do you think would surprise us most, uh, to know about the real life of someone heading up a business the way you're heading up InfoPro?
I don't know. I just have fun, to be honest with you. In every situation, I'm having fun. If I don't have joy in my work, I can't work. I cannot operate. So it's not like I can tell you my life is like this. After everyone sleeps, I wake up and I dig earth and do hundreds of things. I can tell you because I'm so passionate about our purpose, which is
Hmm.
unlocking human potential. I'm deeply committed to it as a person, as an individual, but as a company as well. So it drives me, and I don't have to really find reasons why I'm navigating through one challenge to another challenge. So what gives me really joy is working with the team. My real sense of energy comes when I'm just like a team member with them.
Okay.
And what takes away energy is when I'm acting like a boss and taking reports. And both are important, but I'm just giving you a sense like what gives me more energy personally and what is not so energizing to me.
Absolutely, yes. So
Yeah.
then how do you, because I'm sure people come to you for solutions. They come to you with the easy problems get solved elsewhere. People come to you with what they perceive to be the complex problems. How do you decide whether this is something you should engage in and solve, or is it something that you need to gently let them solve it, even though they came to you because they feel like they can't solve it? How do you handle that? Because I'm sure every day there's got to be something that comes to you that says, "Oh, we can't figure this out. What do you think we should do?"
Yeah, earlier in, and I have a better reflection about this issue. Earlier, I used to jump into problem solving quickly. That was my go-to mode. Okay, let's do it. And the thing that would make me unique in this case amongst a wide variety of my team members is just what is the level and richness of the pattern in your mind given your
Mhm.
experiences in working in different scenarios, situations, leading different teams and projects and complexities in life. It just creates a different pattern that you process information through. And so if you use that, you do find two or three ways to solve a problem. And
Yeah,
so my first reaction always has been, "Oh, hey, let's go and do this. And why don't you think about that?" Um, of late, I realized that while that is good in short term, it is not good so good in long term in many situations. And it's still a muscle I'm developing as to I have to stop myself and ask, think about a more appreciative question that I can seed in, and then have someone answer it so that answer becomes their answer, like nudge
sure.
it. But I'm a work in progress in that realm. Like I've not perfected that art yet.
Well, speaking of being a work in progress, when you think back to the very beginning of your career and who you were as a young leader, you're still a relatively young man, obviously. But if you go back to the beginning, how would you say you have evolved, even in the early days? Because we work with a lot of new leaders, emerging leaders, and I think particularly today, maybe it's a generational issue. Maybe there are other factors related to technology and media, misinformation and overinformation, maybe. But whatever the
Mhm.
factors are, I do talk to a lot of emerging leaders who are struggling with that transition from being a valued individual contributor, and now I have people reporting to me. Are there any lessons that you learned early on that would be pretty helpful for that first time leader who's just kicking off?
When I was in school, I read a book which had a big impact in my life. It was from Dale Carnegie, How to Make Friends and Influence People. Many lessons in that book influenced. I reflect back and I feel like because I read it at an age which was very, I took a lot of those
Mhm.
lessons and I wrote down in my diary some of those things. But later on, I figured that things are very complex and you need a set of rules in for yourself so that you can remove the complexity in your life for decision making. And some of the tools I developed for myself, one is my own personal values that I will never, ever move away from. So I decided my personal values. And second, I decided the values of our organization.
Mhm.
And come what may, I always process all information, complex information through those values. So that's the human side of it. And it helps me it keeps things simpler. I sleep well because I have nothing in my mind that's playing because I've
Right.
processed it. The second most important thing, because what happens is these many things attract you, like I don't want to miss that opportunity and this opportunity. The second thing I realize is that I have to establish one core purpose, our why. and I have to organize the entire organization behind that why. And our why is unlocking human potential. And so when we make decisions, we are looking at how are we furthering our purpose, our why. And so in terms of our products and services, in terms of also looking back and reflecting how we are doing it in our own organization. And we
Mhm.
can be preaching to others that if we are not applying it to ourselves internally. And so that's something that I felt very strongly about. I did have a moment of scare earlier this year when much of our organization became completely remote, and I felt like I'm losing that cultural orientation and that the connection to a purpose, because many of these things are you model behavior around
Mhm.
these things, and so that modeling could not happen as easily in a Teams meeting or a Zoom meeting always. And so that, so I made some course corrections in that respect, but I would bring it down to just being authentic to yourself and simplifying your life by having your set of values and a clear purpose for the business, and let that give you direction.
That prompts two thoughts. The first is a lot of the newer leaders that I speak with, when I ask them,
Uh,
why do you lead? Why did you take this role? What excites you about leading others? They don't have that. They most of the time they will say it was the next natural step. It's the way to make more money. Yeah, I want to grow my career, but they don't yet have that internal engine that says, this is what I stand for. This is why I want to lead. And then when I ask them if they think that's important, they will say, yeah, that's important for later. I think they have a vision in their head that, oh, when I become a big time leader, then I'll have my own personal mission and my own values. And yet, what we see in the best of the emerging leaders is they already know why they want to lead. Exactly as you're saying, they have thought through, why is this important to me? What impact do I want to have on others? Why am I doing this for the business? How am I aligned with the business from a values standpoint? And I think if we bring the conversation full circle, you talked about not being stressed out, not having, I'm sure you have tough times, but in
mhm.
general,
Yeah.
life is pretty good because you are in alignment with those values.
Mhm.
Um, the other thing I've been hearing lately is there are some organizations that are really succeeding in the virtual environment. They're creating a true spirit of teamness, alignment. But what I'm hearing from them is the amount of work it takes to do that. What they're telling me is they have to be so intentional that whereas in a physical environment, there are so many cues. Like you walk into the day, you can tell who's having a good day, who's having a bad day. And if you feel your time as a leader needs to be devoted to someone who's having a not so great day, you just naturally go over without even thinking about it. Or there are so
Right.
many subconscious cues because you're there. Whereas in a virtual environment, you have to put in the extreme energy of connecting with your people every week and connecting with them personally, not just having teams meetings that are about
Correct.
projects. And
Yeah.
it's probably more energy. It's probably requires more
More energy.
energy in a
That's right.
virtual environment. And not every leader is willing or able to deliver that more energy to make that happen.
Yeah.
When you talked,
However, I'll
go
just
ahead.
add one point to what you just said. You know, I'm really grateful to a lot of mentors I had in my career, whether they worked directly with me, I was reporting on to them, or they were my clients. And I just happened to soak in everything someone had to teach me. I was in this continuous learning cycle always. And I felt, especially given our purpose of unlocking human potential, that we owe it to our team members. How will they learn? How will they be
Yeah.
mentored? Who will model behavior for them? I just feel so strongly about that. And so that was just another reason for me to think about it differently.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I remember as a very young man how much I hung on the words of my leaders, even to the point of a leader would have a certain way of phrasing something, and I would think that's it, that's good. I will remember that, or a certain way of thinking about something. And we sometimes forget how important leaders are as models for others in the organization. A leader can just take very small actions, do very what to him or her seems like a very small thing, but to others it's a very big thing. Whether it's a small effort to include everyone into a conversation, or a small effort to highlight the contributions of somebody who normally doesn't get the limelight, doesn't get celebrated. All of those
Yeah.
little things can have huge impacts on somebody's attitude toward their own career.
Right.
You have a chance to speak to other CEOs, and because of that, I think you have a good finger on the pulse of what's happening in the business environment more broadly. So, as
Mhm.
we sit here, it is late August 2024. What's your just sense of the business landscape globally? Yeah, I know you have a lot of clients in the US, but you also have global clients. What's just your broad sense of the business landscape?
Three things stand out clearly. One is there is a little edginess about economy. Uh, People are not sure where we are going. Some folks are talking about recession. There's inflation. There's stunted growth, and we have a major election coming up in US. All these will have an impact. We also have two wars going on in the world, and they have a major impact. So there is certainly a sense of what is plan B? What happens if things really fall down? So that's one area I feel leaders are still processing that and playing it out. The second area is um, there was some kind of demand that post COVID that suddenly came to every business, and so sales and revenue were up in many businesses. I don't want to generalize this, but in many businesses I've heard, and then to keep up with that momentum this year has been really difficult, right?
Mhm.
Even to hold the ground from where they were last year. So that is really taking up their time because there was a lot of buoyancy and there was a lot of sort of excitement and energy. And so that's the second thing I hear leaders often talk about, like how this year is going on and what they're doing to just hold to the year. And I feel in while this is happening, suddenly they see AI is disrupting their business in
Mhm.
ways that they sense in the next few years it will change the behavior and the fundamentals of their business in big ways. You have examples of companies who are using AI to take over 70% of customer service tickets, as an example, right? Or the product experience is changing for companies who are investing high on AI for clients. And that's another big area of the conversation. Like for us internally in our organization is where has our cheese moved and what does our new service look like? What do clients
Yes.
need now than earlier? So I characterize those three things as top of mind for most CEOs and business leaders.
And I think sometimes we forget that as much as the pandemic created business losers like restaurants and theaters and other places where people gathered, it also created a lot of winners, created a lot of new
Okay.
business flow
Yes.
in new directions. And then that flow has been shutting down in many cases or softening in many cases. And then you add to that the AI disruption, and we're all still figuring out what is AI going to mean to each of us, to all of us, particularly in an age where everyone has a mobile phone, everyone is connected. And that leads me to, I know this is a difficult question.
Uh-huh.
All of our employees have
Mhm.
these mobile devices.
Yes.
All of our employees are being fed a stream of news information, commercial information, social information and media. Some of it's misinformation, some of it is factual information, but news, social, commercial are all getting mixed up. We don't always know what appears to be news is actually commercial. What appears to be social is actually commercial.
Yes.
And some of it's real and some of it's not. And some of it's intentionally not real. So we have employees being fed this 724, and we get them maybe 8 hours out of the day. And we're just focusing in on trying to drive results, getting work done. How, it's not a fair question, but how do we can't counter it, but how do we react to this world of overwhelm with information for our employees?
Yeah, very difficult. There are two parts to this extremely difficult situation we find ourselves in. One is historical context, like When human beings developed language as a way to communicate, it took us centuries
Yeah.
to figure it out perfectly. And now this social construct is creating a different kind of language of communication and interaction. So if I look at it from that perspective, I'm thinking we are in one of those zones where it's peaking, and new rules will be created, and new behaviors and new cultural systems will be created within the next 1 or 2 generations. So maybe that's one area which none of us have a handle on, and we are just
Hmm.
contributing to something which through osmosis is just growing and will shape the future. But the one thing I feel that we can proactively do is that we all end up living in digital bubbles. And when you live in a digital bubble, the social machine feeds you the same thing and just keeps on telling you the same thing that you like or you want to hear, right? And that is a big danger, especially for leaders who need to have their eyes and ears on a
Hmm.
cross purpose information set so that they can make judgment. So I felt like there are two things that I recommend and I've done personally. One is I've been intentional in being on two cross contrarian bubbles at the same time.
Hmm.
So you cannot stop this information. Like we are talking and my phone is listening. Next time I pick up my phone, something is going to pop up there. So one is trying to be more intentional about being in a couple of different kinds of bubbles so that you get, you know, the best thing is if you can completely remove it from your life, but that's
Hmm.
not, it's not feasible, it seems to me. So one is that is being in cross. But the second thing I've noticed is that when you sift through information, there are some amazing people with deep work, and they are not very shiny. They're not in the front always, but they have done deep work. You can double click and look at a 30-page document they have written on the topic. And the moment you lay your hands on those, I would say read that up first before you do all these small bites of information, because I feel like there's a lot there. Someone spent a lot of time already in
Yeah.
sifting through, and then maybe that elevates your thought on a particular topic.
And that's probably ultimately where real insight comes from, taking in all of that from that wide variety and then coming to a point of view that is unique in the marketplace
Correct.
potentially. I went through an exercise where I asked my son, I have a son in his early 20s. I said, okay, give me your top 5 YouTube channels and your top 5 Instagram accounts that you follow, and then a few other, like anything on social media and TikTok. Just give me all of those, and I would like to follow them for a while. He,
Oh,
first of
interesting.
all, he said no. First of all, he just said no. He said, no, I'm not showing you what I follow. And he said, that's for me. And I was surprised that I had to talk him into it. But so I explained the why. I explained why I
Uh-huh.
wanted to do this. He said, "Okay, but don't be shocked." And so he gave